Hey guys, tonight we dive deep into the shadowy origins of the Knights Templar, where dusty crusades and forgotten vows whisper through the ancient stones of Jerusalem, pulling you into a world of clashing swords and cryptic oaths under the relentless Middle Eastern sun. Imagine yourself wandering those parched, windswept hills, the air thick with the scent of olive groves and distant campfires as knights in heavy cloaks trudge through the chaos, their eyes weary from battles that feel all too real even now. You probably won't survive this tale without dozing off. First, it's that kind of boring history where the thrill is in the slow unraveling of mysteries that time has nearly erased. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. Maybe you're tuning in from a cozy bed in rainy London or a hammock in sunny California, adding your own sleepy vibe to this global lullaby. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the gates of history back in the early 12th century, where the Holy Land simmers with the aftermath of the First Crusade. It's 1119, and you're amid a ragtag group of 9 knights led by a fellow named Hugh de Payens, who've just pledged themselves to protect Christian pilgrims trekking through the dangerous paths from Europe to Jerusalem. The streets are alive with the clamor of merchants haggling over spices, the sharp tang of sweat and horse manure filling your nostrils, while the call to prayer echoes off sun-baked walls, reminding you how this melting pot of cultures was a powder keg waiting to explode. These knights, initially just a band of holy warriors, without much fanfare, set up shop right in the shadow of the old Temple of Solomon, which gives them their name, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, or Templars for short. As you linger in this scene, you can't help but chuckle at how these guys started out like a medieval startup, armed with little more than faith and rusty swords, probably thinking, what could go wrong? Fast forward a bit in your mind's eye, and you're watching as these Templars begin to carve out their role in this chaotic landscape. Mainstream history tells us that their formation was a direct response to the bloodshed of the First Crusade, which ended in 1099 with Christians capturing Jerusalem only to leave pilgrims vulnerable to bandits and rival armies. You feel the weight of their vows, a mix of religious fervor and practical necessity as they patrol the roads, their armor clinking softly in the night breeze, the stars above twinkling like distant witnesses. But here's a quirky tidbit that'll make you smirk in the dark. Some fringe tales whisper that, while guarding the Temple Mount, these knights stumbled upon ancient treasures or esoteric knowledge hidden beneath the ruins, maybe even the Ark of the Covenant, or some alchemical secrets that would make modern conspiracy buffs salivate. Imagine them down there, dusty and wide-eyed, uncovering relics that could fund empires, all while trying to keep their poker faces on for the Pope back home. Historians still argue whether the Templars were purely a defensive order, or if they had ulterior motives from the get-go, perhaps using their position to amass power under the guise of piety. As the years tick by in this narrative, you trudge alongside Hugh and his crew, feeling the grind of daily life in a fortified outpost. The Templars' early days were marked by austere living, strict vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience that sound about as exciting as watching paint dry on a castle wall. Yet their reputation spreads like wildfire across Europe, drawing in recruits who see them as the ultimate blend of monk and warrior, a concept that's equal parts noble and, let's face it, a bit ridiculous in hindsight. You might picture them sharing a meal of bland stew around a campfire, one knight cracking a joke about how their poor status doesn't stop them from dreaming of silk robes, only for another to quip back that at least they're not the ones dodging taxes back in France. Speaking of which, here's a light jab. If the Templars were around today, they'd probably be starting a crowdfunding campaign for their Pilgrim Protection Service, complete with viral TikToks of sword fights set to pop music. Now, wouldn't that be a plot twist for the ages? But beneath the sarcasm, you sense the genuine camaraderie building as these men forge bonds that will echo through centuries. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. You feel the tension rising as political intrigue weaves through their story. The Templars quickly gained the endorsement of the Church, with Pope Innocent II granting them special privileges in 1139, exempting them from local taxes and laws. Talk about a medieval get-out-of-jail-free card. This mainstream fact underscores how they transitioned from obscure guardians to a recognized military order paving the way for their explosive growth. Yet as you wander deeper into this tale, the sensory details pull you in the cool, stone floors of their headquarters, contrasting with the blazing heat outside the faint metallic tang of weapons being polished and the low murmurs of evening prayers that lull you into a drowsy haze. And for a modern aside, imagine if these guys had smartphones. They'd be snapping selfies with captured flags and hashtagging Shakur Crusade Life, making their exploits go viral faster than you can say Holy War. But let's not forget the quirks. Some say the Templars dabbled in early forms of cryptography, hiding messages in their seals that could stump even today's codebreakers, adding a layer of spy thriller flair to their origins. As the narrative flows onward, you start to see how these knights' humble start set the stage for something bigger, even if it all feels like a slow-burning fuse. Historians still argue whether their rapid rise was fueled by divine purpose or shrewd opportunism, debating if they were truly the chivalric heroes of legend or just savvy operators in a turbulent era. You chuckle at the thought of them as the original multitaskers, balancing prayer beads and battle axes, perhaps joking among themselves about who gets to wear the shiniest helmet. Another lighthearted poke if you tried to live like them today, swearing off luxuries and sleeping on hard floors, you'd probably last about 5 minutes before craving your Netflix binge talk about a reality check. Finally, as the sun sets on this section of the story, you feel the weight of history settling in the Templars' beginnings, like a gentle wave lapping at the shores of your consciousness, ready to carry you further into the night. From the shadows of their humble origins, you now find yourself charging into the heart of the Crusades sword in hand, as the Templars transform from guardians of dusty roads into fierce battlefield stalwarts, their white mantles with red crosses billowing like flags in the scorching winds of the Holy Land. The sun beats down mercilessly on your shoulders, mixing sweat with the metallic tang of blood and sand, while the distant roar of clashing armies echoes across the plains, pulling you deeper into the relentless cycle of holy wars that defined the 12th century. Remember those early vows from back in Jerusalem? They're about to be tested in fire as you patrol alongside these knights, shielding wide-eyed pilgrims from ambushes in the jagged hills and narrow passes that twist like serpents through the desert. As you march with the Templars through the brutal sands, the air thick with the acrid smoke of campfires and the cries of weary travelers, you can't help but appreciate how these warriors became the Crusades' unsung heroes, organizing convoys and fortifying outposts with a discipline that felt almost superhuman. A mainstream historical fact shines through here. During the Second Crusade, in the 1140s, the Templars played a pivotal role in defending key strongholds like the city of Ascalon, their strategic expertise helping to hold back Muslim forces led by figures like Zengi, even if ultimate victory slipped away. You feel the rhythm of their patrols, the steady clop of horses' hooves on rocky terrain, the cool rush of wind against your face as night falls, bringing a momentary respite from the day's chaos. It's all so monotonously heroic, isn't it? Like watching a never-ending medieval drama where the good guys just keep showing up, rain or shine, because someone has to play the part. But let's add a touch of the absurd to this gritty tale. After all, who said history can't be fun? Picture this: while the Templars are out there battling for their lives, some fringe stories suggest they dabbled in what we'd call proto-espionage, using carrier pigeons or coded messages hidden in their armor to outmaneuver enemies, almost like ancient James Bonds with a holy twist. You might imagine one knight smirking as he releases a bird into the dusk, whispering, "Take that to the Grand Master before the Saracens crash our party," turning what was supposed to be a solemn duty into a cloak and dagger adventure that sounds straight out of a bad spy novel. And for a light joke to ease you into that sleepy haze, think about how these guys must have felt lugging around all that heavy armor in 100-degree heat. It's like trying to run a marathon in a winter coat. No wonder they probably joked, "If God's on our side, why didn't he invent air conditioning?" Historians still argue whether the Templars' involvement in the Crusades was purely defensive or if they actively provoked conflicts to expand their influence, debating if their actions prolonged the wars or merely mitigated the bloodshed. As the battles rage on, you trudge through the aftermath of skirmishes, the ground littered with broken arrows and the faint, earthy scent of disturbed soil, your muscles aching from the constant vigilance that defined their role. The Templars didn't just fight. They innovated, creating mobile field hospitals and supply lines that kept pilgrims alive on treacherous journeys, turning what could have been a suicide mission into a somewhat organized affair. Yet amid the sensory overload, the sharp crack of crossbows, the bitter taste of rationed water, and the low hum of chants under starlit skies, it's easy to drift into a modern aside. If the Templars had GPS back then, they'd have been leaving five-star reviews on pilgrim routes saying, "Great views, but the bandits could use some manners." Another quirky tidbit creeps in here. One that might make you chuckle. In the dark legends persists that the Templars carried magic talismans, perhaps ancient relics from the Temple Mount that we talked about earlier, which they believed granted them supernatural luck in battle, like portable good luck charms that turn the tide of fights. Though who knows if that was faith or just clever psychology at play. You're right there in the thick of it now, feeling the adrenaline fade into exhaustion as the Templars regroup after a hard-won defense, their campfires flickering like distant memories in the vast night. They protected not just bodies but spirits, offering a sense of security in a land where danger lurked around every dune, all while maintaining their austere lifestyle that made them stand out even among fellow crusaders. For another lighthearted jab, imagine if these knights had social media. They'd be posting battlefield selfies with captions like, "Just another day slaying for the Lord, Nashire blessed and armored," only to get comments from back home saying, "Wish I was there," instead of plowing fields. And as the narrative meanders onward, you sense the weight of their sacrifices, the way their early crusade involvement built a reputation that echoed far beyond the sands, tying back to those initial vows that started it all. Historians still argue whether the Templars' military tactics were revolutionary innovations or simply effective adaptations of existing strategies, pondering if their success stemmed from divine favor or superior training. Through the haze of dust and determination, you witness the Templars' unyielding commitment, even as fatigue sets in their presence, becoming a beacon for pilgrims who might otherwise have turned back. The sensory details envelop you, the rough texture of a saddle under your hands, the distant howl of desert winds carrying whispers of prayers, and the subtle camaraderie of shared meals around the fire, where stories of past battles lull everyone into a trance. But let's not forget a final joke to wrap this up. If the Templars were modern soldiers, they'd probably complain about the lack of Wi-Fi in the wilderness, turning epic quests into everyday gripes that make you smile in your half-asleep state. As the Crusade's early chapters close for now, you feel the story flowing seamlessly forward, ready to carry you deeper into their rising legend. From the fiery battlefields of the Crusades, you now feel the pull back to Europe, where the Templars' hard-won reputation starts to bloom into something far grander, transforming them from desert warriors into a powerhouse of wealth and influence that spreads like ivy across kingdoms and cathedrals. Remember those gritty patrols and defenses from the Holy Land? They're paying off big time as tales of your valor reach eager ears in places like Paris and Rome, drawing in donations of gold and land that turn a simple nightly order into a medieval juggernaut, all while the scent of fresh parchment and incense fills the air in bustling council halls. You saunter through this evolving story, feeling the weight of heavy coin purses and sealed decrees in your hands as the Templars leverage their holy status to build an empire that feels almost too good to be true. And honestly, it kinda was. As you step into the 12th century's latter half, the Templars' rise gathers momentum with their network of commanderies sprouting up like mushrooms after rain, offering safe havens for travelers, and a backbone for financial dealings that crisscross the continent. A mainstream historical fact grounds this ascent. By the mid-1100s. The Templars had secured papal bulls, like the one from Pope Eugene III in 1145, granting them unprecedented autonomy and the ability to collect tithes, which fueled their rapid expansion and made them key players in European politics. You can almost taste the richest stew of ambition in the air, the flicker of candlelight in drafty chapter houses, where knights plot their next moves, and the soft rustle of silk robes on nobles who seek their counsel. All while the distant clang of blacksmiths hammering out new weapons reminds you that power always comes with a price. It's like watching a startup hit it big. One day they're scrapping in the sand, and the next they're hobnobbing with kings, probably thinking, who knew saving pilgrims would come with such perks? But let's sprinkle in a bit of whimsy to keep things light after all. Every success story has its oddball elements. Here's a quirky tidbit that might tickle your sleepy imagination. Some fringe lore insists the Templars uncovered ancient manuscripts or artifacts during their digs in Jerusalem, perhaps alchemical recipes or maps to lost civilizations, which they used to amass secret fortunes through trade in exotic goods, turning them into the original treasure hunters with a monastic twist. Picture you as a Templar stashing away a dusty scroll in a hidden compartment of your saddlebag, smirking as it leads to a windfall of spices or gems that fund another fortress. It's like having a medieval lottery ticket that always wins. And for a gentle joke to ease the narrative along, imagine if these guys had stock options today. They'd be the ones throwing lavish parties in their castles saying, "Back in the Crusades, we fought for this, now pass the mead." Historians still argue whether the Templars' rise was a natural evolution of their mission or a calculated grab for power, debating if their growing influence strengthened Christendom or sowed the seeds of their eventual downfall. As the story unfolds, you find yourself navigating the Templars' expanding web from the misty highlands of Scotland to the sunny vineyards of France, where their commanderies become hubs of activity, buzzing with scribes, tallying accounts, and squires tending to stables filled with the earthy scent of hay and horse sweat. They didn't just collect wealth. They innovated with it, creating the first international banking system where knights could deposit funds in one country and withdraw in another, making travel safer and commerce smoother. Think of it as the ancient version of an ATM network, but with more chainmail and less Wi-Fi. You feel the thrill of this growth, the cool touch of engraved coins in your palm, and the low hum of negotiations in grand halls where Templars broker deals between warring lords, their white cloaks a symbol of neutrality that commands respect. For a modern aside, it's reminiscent of those big tech companies that start in a garage and end up running the world. Except here, the garage was a holy site, and the product was protection with a side of piety. Of course, with great power comes the inevitable mix of admiration and envy, and you sense the undercurrents of intrigue as the Templars amass vast estates and fleets of ships, their influence seeping into royal courts and even papal elections. Another lighthearted poke: if the Templars were around in the age of social media, they'd be influencers, avant-garde, posting about their epic wealth-building hacks with hashtags like nightlife goals, only to get trolled by peasants commenting, "Nice castle, but can you pay my taxes?" This rise wasn't just about money. It wove into the fabric of daily life, with Templars offering loans to cash-strapped nobles or safeguarding treasures in their vaults, all while maintaining their vows of poverty. Ironic, isn't it? How poor soldiers ended up richer than most kings. And tying back to those early days in Jerusalem, you recall how their battlefield heroics opened these doors, much like a resume that lands you the corner office after starting in the mailroom. As the narrative meanders through this golden era, you bask in the sensory tapestry, the warm glow of stained glass windows in their churches, the crisp snap of banners in the wind, and the murmured prayers that blend with the clink of gold being counted in dimly lit chambers. Yet amidst the grandeur, there's room for one more joke. The Templars must have had the best poker faces in history, accepting donations with a straight face while thinking, "This gold will fund our next crusade, suckers." But beyond the sarcasm, their influence extended to diplomacy, where they mediated truces and advised on strategy, solidifying their status as Europe's go-to problem solvers. Historians still argue whether this accumulation of power corrupted the Templars' original ideals or merely adapted them to a changing world, pondering if their wealth was a blessing from on high or a tempting serpent in the garden. Finally, as the sun sets on this chapter of ascent, you feel the Templars' story settling into a rhythm of prosperity, their transformation complete from ragtag protectors to esteemed overlords, all while the echoes of past battles fade into the background hum of European intrigue. It's a tale of ambition wrapped in holy cloth, where every castle gained and alliance forged pulls you deeper into the lull of history's embrace, ready for what comes next. From the heights of their burgeoning power in Europe, you now delve deeper into the Templars' shadowy world of finance, where stacks of gold and clever ledgers turn their order into the medieval equivalent of a global bank. handling loans and deposits that flow like rivers of coin across borders, all while the faint clink of money bags and the scratch of quills on parchment pull you into a realm of calculated whispers and hidden vaults. Remember that rise to wealth from the last stretch of the story, with commanderies popping up everywhere. Well, those fortified outposts didn't just house knights. They became bustling hubs where pilgrims and nobles alike could stash their riches safe from thieves and taxes as you feel the cool weight of a sealed letter of credit in your hand, promising funds waiting halfway across the continent. It's all so deceptively simple, this early form of banking that let you travel without carrying a fortune in your saddlebags, probably making you think, who needs a horse when you've got a promissory note? As you wander through the Templars' financial empire, the air thick with the musty scent of old tomes and polished wood in their treasury rooms, you start to grasp how they revolutionized money handling in ways that feel eerily modern. A mainstream historical fact stands out here. By the late 12th century, the Templars had established a sophisticated system of letters of credit and checks, allowing knights and merchants to deposit funds in one location, say a commandery in London, and withdraw them in another like Acre in the Holy Land, which streamlined trade and reduced the risks of robbery on long journeys. You can almost hear the low murmur of transactions in candlelit halls, the soft thud of coin pouches on tables, and the rustle of documents bearing wax seals, each one a testament to their efficiency that kept the wheels of commerce turning even amid crusading chaos. But here's where it gets fun, a quirky tidbit from the fringes. Some tales suggest the Templars incorporated mystical elements into their banking, like using encoded symbols from ancient texts they found in Jerusalem to secure their vaults, turning financial records into cryptic puzzles that only initiated members could decipher, as if their ledgers were straight out of a wizard's grimoire. Of course not, everything was as straightforward as it seemed, and you feel the undercurrents of intrigue as this financial network grew, weaving through courts and markets with the precision of a well-oiled machine. For a light joke to cut through the seriousness, imagine a Templar banker today trying to explain interest rates to a knight fresh from battle. Sure, you borrowed for your sword, but now it's got a holy fee attached, my friend, turning what was a groundbreaking innovation into something almost comical in hindsight. Historians still argue whether the Templars' banking system was a pure extension of their charitable mission or a deliberate strategy to consolidate power, debating if it truly aided the faithful or just lined their coffers for ulterior motives. As the story unfolds, you navigate the sensory details of this empire, the warm glow of lanterns illuminating stacks of gold florins, the earthy aroma of ink mixed with incense, and the hushed voices of clerks bargaining over loans, all creating a lull that makes you sink deeper into your pillows. Building on that foundation, the Templars didn't stop at basic loans. They became lenders to kings and popes, offering credit that funded wars and cathedrals, which only amplified their influence across Europe. You might picture yourself in a Grand Templar preceptory, handing over a bag of coins to an indebted monarch, feeling the smooth texture of the metal and the tension in the air as deals are struck, all while tying back to those early crusade days where their battlefield prowess earned them the trust to handle such weighty matters. For another gentle jab, if the Templars ran a bank in the modern world, they'd probably have drive-through windows at their castles with knights in armor asking, "Would you like fries with that loan?" A silly notion that highlights how ahead of their time they were. Amid this growth, their financial savvy extended to managing vast estates and investments, turning donations into profitable ventures, like sheep farming or wine production, which funded more than just holy wars. It built a legacy of economic might. Yet as you immerse yourself in this web of wealth, the modern asides keep creeping in, making the whole thing feel relatable in a drowsy, ironic way. Think about it. Their letters of credit were basically the first credit cards, letting you charge expenses and settle up later, but without the late fees or reward points. How's that for a medieval upgrade? And for one more lighthearted poke, imagine a Templar audit gone wrong with a knight quipping, "I swear that gold was here yesterday. It must have gone on a crusade of its own." A nod to the risks they faced, like embezzlement or political backlash, that kept their operations on a knife's edge. Through it all, you sense the continuity from their origins, how those dusty patrols in the Holy Land evolved into this financial fortress with every deposit echoing the clang of their swords from sections past. As the narrative glides forward, you feel the rhythm of the Templars' financial empire slowing to a comfortable pace, the details wrapping around you like a warm blanket, the faint chime of bells marking the end of trading hours, the crisp feel of parchment under your fingers, and the subtle whispers of deals in the shadows. This system not only protected assets but also fostered a sense of security in an unstable world, even if it sowed seeds for future envy among rivals. Historians still argue whether the Templars' financial innovations were driven by necessity or ambition, pondering if they were pioneers of commerce or just opportunistic monks with a knack for numbers. Finally, as the day's transactions wind down and the candle flames flicker low, you find yourself easing out of this financial tale, the Templars' banking prowess a steady hum in the background, ready to carry you toward the next layer of their story. From the echoing halls of finance and fortified treasuries, you now strap on your armor once more, marching alongside the Templars into the distant flames of expanding military campaigns, where sieges rattle ancient walls and tentative alliances forge paths through uncharted lands, turning their legend into a tapestry of blood strategy and unlikely friendships amid the roar of trumpets and the sting of salty sea air on your face. Remember that vast financial empire we delved into last time with its letters of credit and bulging coffers? Well, it's exactly what's bankrolling these far-flung adventures, funding ships and sieges that stretch from the Holy Land to the edges of Europe as you feel the rough grip of a sword hilt in your hand and the rhythmic thud of boots on sun-baked earth pulling you back into the chaos with a mix of duty and reluctant excitement. As you charge into the heart of these expanded campaigns, the air thick with the metallic tang of weapons and the distant cries of rallying troops, the Templars' military prowess takes center stage, evolving from local defenses to grand-scale operations that shaped the Crusades' later chapters. A mainstream historical fact anchors this era. During the Third Crusade in the late 1180s and 1190s. The Templars fought alongside luminaries like Richard the Lionheart, playing a crucial role in sieges such as the one at Acre in 1191, where their disciplined formations and engineering skills helped breach formidable defenses even if the overall quest to reclaim Jerusalem fell short. You trudge through the muddy siege lines, the ground slick underfoot from recent rains, the acrid smoke of siege engines curling into your nostrils, and the low chants of soldiers building a sense of camaraderie that feels almost hypnotic in its repetition. It's like being part of a massive medieval road trip gone wrong, where instead of sightseeing, you're lobbing rocks at castles and hoping your tent doesn't leak. But let's not forget the weirder side of these campaigns where history gets a dash of the fantastical to keep things entertaining on this sleepy journey. Here's a quirky tidbit that might make you grin in the dark. Some fringe stories claim the Templars employed mystical scouts, perhaps drawing from those ancient relics they supposedly unearthed back in Jerusalem, using astrological charts or divining rods to predict enemy movements, turning what should be straightforward battles into episodes of a historical fantasy novel, where knights double as amateur wizards. Imagine you as a Templar, peering at the stars before a siege, muttering, "The constellations say we're good to go, fingers crossed." And for a light joke to ease the tension, think about how these guys must have felt hauling massive trebuchets across deserts. It's like trying to move your couch up a flight of stairs alone, exhausting, sweaty, and probably ending with someone saying, "Next time, let's just send a strongly worded letter." Historians still argue whether the Templars' expanded campaigns were driven by religious zeal or strategic opportunism, debating if their alliances with European monarchs truly advanced the Crusader cause or merely extended the conflicts for their own gain. As the campaigns press onward, you find yourself forging alliances in distant outposts from the rugged coasts of Cyprus to the misty valleys of Iberia, where the Templars join forces with local rulers against common foes like the Moors or other Muslim states, their white crosses flashing like signals in the chaos. The sensory details envelop you, the sharp crack of arrows whizzing overhead, the earthy taste of field rations chewed under a canopy of stars, and the subtle vibration of war drums that pulse through your bones, lulling you into a rhythmic trance. Tying back to that financial web from before, remember how their wealth funded these expeditions? It's what allowed them to maintain fleets of ships and supply lines, turning them into the Crusades' logistics masters, much like a modern supply chain manager, ensuring the coffee arrives on time for the office grind. For another gentle jab, if the Templars had email back, then their alliance negotiations would be full of passive-aggressive messages like, "Dear King, your troops are late again. Please advise," making international diplomacy sound like a group chat gone awry. Of course, not all alliances were smooth. You sense the friction as the Templars navigated the political minefield, sometimes clashing with other orders like the Hospitallers over territory or resources their shared holy missions, occasionally devolving into petty rivalries that feel hilariously human. A modern aside slips in here. It's akin to rival sports teams squabbling over the best locker room, except with catapults instead of cheerleaders, highlighting how even sacred vows couldn't erase good old-fashioned competition. And for one more lighthearted poke picture, a Templar commander trying to rally troops after a failed siege saying, "All right, lads, that didn't go as planned, but at least we got some great stories for the tavern next rounds on the orders tab." This expansion wasn't just about fighting. It involved adapting to new terrains and tactics, from naval battles in the Mediterranean to guerrilla warfare in the mountains, all while their legend grew with each victory or narrow escape. As the narrative winds through these military exploits, you feel the weight of exhaustion setting in, the campaigns blending into a blur of sieges and strategic retreats where the Templars' presence became a constant in the Crusades' evolving saga. They didn't just expand their reach, they influenced military doctrine, introducing concepts like mobile fortifications and coordinated attacks that echoed through history, even if it all feels like one long, tiring march in the grand scheme. Yet amid the clamor, you catch a quirky echo of those financial days, perhaps using their banking knowledge to fund mercenaries or bribe informants, blurring the lines between warrior and wheeler dealer in ways that add layers to their mystique. Historians still argue whether the Templars' military expansions strengthened Christian holdings or overextended their resources, pondering if their alliances were genuine partnerships or calculated moves to secure more power. Finally, as the dust settles on another campaign and the stars wink above like distant campfires, you ease out of this martial tale, the Templars' legends swelling with each step, ready to carry you forward into the shadows of internal strife that loom on the horizon. From the fading echoes of distant battlefields and forged alliances, you now slip into the quieter, more insidious realm of the Templars' internal world, where cracks begin to show in their once unbreakable unity, as whispers of rivalries and buried secrets echo through the stone corridors of their commanderies, turning brothers in arms into cautious allies, amid the flickering torchlight and the musty scent of old parchments that cling to the air like unspoken accusations. Remember those triumphant campaigns and financial networks from earlier chapters, where the Templars stood as unbreakable shields and shrewd bankers? Well, as their empire swells, you start to feel the strain within, the subtle tensions bubbling up like an overfilled wineskin, ready to burst, pulling you into a web of intrigue that's less about charging into battle and more about navigating the minefield of egos and hidden agendas in dimly lit halls. As you wander deeper into this fraying tapestry, the Templars' internal conflicts emerge from the shadows, fueled by rapid growth that stretch their resources, thin and bred resentment among members jostling for power and position. A mainstream historical fact cuts through the haze. By the early 13th century, the order faced significant internal divisions, exemplified by disputes over leadership and wealth distribution, such as the rivalry between Grand Masters and regional commanders, who often clashed over how to allocate funds from their vast treasuries, leading to inefficiencies that weakened their overall effectiveness. You sense the atmosphere thickening, the cool draft of castle drafts brushing your skin, the low murmur of heated debates in chapter meetings where voices rise just above a whisper, and the sharp tang of ink as letters of complaint are scrawled, all creating a palpable unease that makes the grand halls feel more like a pressure cooker than a sanctuary. It's like being in a family business where everyone's related, but no one gets along, with cousins fighting over the inheritance before the patriarch's even gone. But to lighten the mood in this shadowy narrative, let's toss in a quirky tidbit that's sure to spark a sleepy smile. Some fringe tales suggest the Templars harbored secret societies within their ranks, perhaps conducting midnight rituals inspired by the ancient mysteries they uncovered in Jerusalem, like chanting over cryptic symbols to invoke protection or wisdom, turning their order into a blend of monkish devotion and amateur mysticism that sounds like a plot from a budget historical thriller. Imagine you as a curious knight stumbling upon a hidden chamber where brothers don robes and murmur incantations, thinking, is this still about God, or did we accidentally start a book club for wizards? And for a light joke to ease you through the tension picture, a Templar trying to mediate a rivalry. All right, you take the gold from France and I'll handle the spies in Spain. Oh, and let's not forget to blame the Hospitallers for everything as usual. This internal discord wasn't just about petty squabbles. It hinted at deeper fractures where secrets, perhaps, regarding their financial dealings or forbidden knowledge festered like unhealed wounds. Historians still argue whether these conflicts were inevitable results of the Order's expansion or symptoms of underlying corruption that eroded their founding principles from within. As the story unfolds, you delve further into the rivalries that pitted Templar against Templar, with regional chapters vying for control over lucrative assets, their disagreements spilling into everything from military strategies to resource allocation, all while tying back to those expansive campaigns where overextended commitments strained loyalties to the breaking point. The sensory details wrap around you: the faint creak of wooden benches in assembly rooms, the earthy aroma of rushed meals shared in tense silence, and the subtle clink of keys to locked chests that hold sensitive documents, making you feel like you're eavesdropping on a conspiracy unfolding in real time. For another gentle jab, it's reminiscent of modern office politics, where everyone's emailing complaints about workload while pretending to be a team, except here, instead of coffee breaks, they're taking prayer breaks to plot their next move, turning holy vows into something akin to corporate maneuvering with a dash of divine intervention. Of course, these tensions weren't without their ironic twists as secrets piled up and eroded trust, with some knights perhaps guarding personal agendas that blurred the lines between duty and self-interest. A modern aside creeps in: if the Templars had group chats, they'd be full of passive-aggressive messages like, great job on that siege, but next time maybe don't spend all the funds on your fancy tent, highlighting how human nature hasn't changed much over centuries. And for one more lighthearted poke, envision a Templar secret meeting derailed by someone forgetting the password. Wait, is it Solomon or Swordfish? Oh, never mind, we're all friends here, I think. Amid this unrest, the Order's famed discipline began to waver, with reports of indiscipline or even defections trickling in, casting long shadows over their storied reputation and linking back to the financial empire that, while impressive, became a source of envy and division. These internal battles were as draining as any physical fight, sapping the spirit that once united them against external threats. As the narrative glides through this era of discord, you feel the weight of these emerging conflicts settling in the Templars' unity, fraying like an old banner in the wind, with every whispered accusation and power play pulling you deeper into the lull of uncertainty. Yet beneath the rivalries, there's a human element that makes it all relatable: the struggle to maintain ideals amid growth and greed, where secrets once meant for protection start to poison the well. Historians still argue whether the internal conflicts were manageable flaws or harbingers of the Order's demise, debating if early interventions could have preserved their cohesion or if the seeds of destruction were sown from the very beginning. Finally, as the shadows lengthen and the echoes of debates fade into the night, you find yourself easing out of this tangled web, the Templars' internal strife, a quiet storm brewing, ready to draw you toward the gathering threats on the horizon. From the brewing internal storms and fractured unity of the Templars, you now cast your gaze outward, sensing the dark clouds of external enemies gathering like vultures over their vast holdings, with kings and popes whispering in shadowed thrones and candlelit chambers, their plots weaving a net of envy and ambition that tightens around the Order's once mighty fortresses, pulling you into a tense game of political chess where every alliance could turn into a betrayal. Remember those internal rivalries from the last chapter, where secrets and power struggles eroded trust from within? Well, those cracks didn't stay hidden for long, as opportunistic rulers across Europe began to eye the Templars' wealth. Those bulging treasuries and sprawling lands with a hunger that feels as sharp as a drawn blade making you feel the chill of impending doom in the air, the faint scent of intrigue mixing with the smoke from distant bonfires. As you navigate this treacherous landscape, the threats escalate with monarchs and church leaders, viewing the Templars not as holy warriors, but as rivals to their own power, their whispers turning into calculated maneuvers that set the stage for downfall. A mainstream historical fact emerges here by the early 14th century King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the Templars, orchestrated a campaign of defamation in alliance with Pope Clement V to seize their assets, culminating in a series of arrests that exploited the order's vulnerabilities and marked the beginning of their end. You can almost hear the rustle of secret correspondences in dimly lit royal courts, the cool touch of wax seals on forged documents, and the low hum of advisors plotting in the dead of night, all while the weight of armored guards patrolling the perimeters adds a layer of paranoia that seeps into your bones. It's like watching a corporate giant get targeted by regulators. Everyone smiles in public, but behind closed doors, it's all about stripping away the competition before they dominate the market. Yet amid the growing peril, there's room for a quirky twist that adds a dash of the absurd to this grim tale, as fringe stories circulate about the Templars' supposed forbidden knowledge or hidden relics, sparking wild accusations, like claims they practiced occult rituals in their vaults, perhaps using ancient artifacts from Jerusalem to summon protection or even influence weather, turning them into unwitting characters in a medieval horror story that sounds more like campfire tales than reality. Imagine you as a Templar overhearing rumors of your order being labeled as sorcerers, chuckling to yourself in the dim light, thinking, if only they knew our biggest secret was just really good bookkeeping. Marver, for a light joke to cut through the tension picture, King Philip trying to explain his schemes to his courtiers. We'll take their gold and call it a holy reclamation. It's not theft if God approves right. This external pressure wasn't just about greed. It fed on the Templars' isolation, as their privileges from popes past now made them seem above the law, a status that bred resentment among nobles who grumbled about unfair advantages. Historians still argue whether these threats were orchestrated responses to genuine misconduct or merely convenient excuses for powerful figures to eliminate a threat, debating if the Templars' independence invited destruction or if they were victims of fabricated charges. As the enemies close in further, you feel the noose tightening with alliances fracturing and spies infiltrating commanderies where every visitor might be a wolf in sheep's clothing, their motives masked by false smiles and honeyed words. Tying back to that financial empire from earlier sections, the Templars' role as bankers meant they held the keys to royal debts, a double-edged sword that made kings like Philip see them as both indispensable and intolerable, with whispers of blackmail or hidden ledgers adding fuel to the fire. The sensory details immerse you, the damp chill of stone walls and fortified keeps, the sharp tang of wine shared at suspicious feasts, and the subtle creak of floorboards under footsteps that could belong to friend or foe, creating an atmosphere thick with uncertainty that lulls you into a wary daze. For another gentle jab, if this were a modern spy thriller, the Templars would be the secretive tech company getting hacked with kings as cybercriminals saying, hand over the data, or in this case, the gold, before we leak your secrets to the world. And as plots deepen, the Templars' vast holdings become prime targets, with rumors of treasure hunts inspiring even more paranoia, as if every castle hid a vault waiting to be plundered. Of course, the involvement of the papacy adds a layer of irony, with popes who once championed the order, now wavering under political pressure, their decrees shifting like sand to appease temporal powers while maintaining a facade of spiritual authority. You might envision yourself in a grand cathedral, the air heavy with incense, and the echo of Latin chants, overhearing cardinals debating the Templars' fate as if they were discussing a troublesome relative at a family reunion. Their family, but do we really need them taking up space at the table? This external siege wasn't just physical, it was psychological, eroding the Templars' morale, as accusations of heresy and corruption spread like wildfire, fueled by the very success that had defined them. For one more light-hearted poke, imagine a Templar knight trying to lighten the mood in a tense meeting. If we're going down, at least let's make sure the history books say we had the best party's wine not included. Amid the threats, the Order's attempts to defend themselves only highlighted their isolation, with appeals to allies falling on deaf ears as the winds of change blew stronger. As the narrative weaves through this gathering storm, you sense the Templars' world closing in their enemies' plots, like shadows lengthening at dusk, each whisper and alliance a reminder that no empire lasts forever. The continuity from internal conflicts makes this feel inevitable, like a story where the hero's flaws invite the villains in all, while the sensory backdrop, the flicker of torchlight in drafty halls, the earthy scent of hidden passages, and the distant toll of bells marking uneasy nights pulls you deeper into the lull. Historians still argue whether the Templars could have navigated these threats through diplomacy, or if their accumulated enemies made collapse unavoidable, pondering the fine line between power and peril. Finally, as the threats loom larger and the air grows thick with anticipation, you find yourself easing toward the edge of this chapter, the Templars' enemies circling like predators in the night, ready to pounce and drag the story into its next dark turn. From the circling shadows of enemies and the thick air of impending betrayal, you suddenly find yourself jolted awake in the dead of night as dawn breaks on a fateful Friday in October, 1307, and the Templars' world erupts into chaos with the thunder of pounding fists on doors and the clash of armored boots echoing through their once safe commanderies, dragging you into the raw shock of raids that sweep across France like a storm seizing brothers who thought their vows would shield them forever. Remember those plotting kings and wavering popes from the last chapter, with their whispers turning into full-blown conspiracies? Now those threats materialize in a flash of steel and ink as King Philip's agents burst in shackling knights in their beds and rifling through vaults filled with the scent of aged gold and dusty scrolls, making you feel the cold iron of manacles biting into your wrists and the disorienting blur of accusations hurled like daggers in the flickering torchlight. As the raids unfold with brutal efficiency, you're thrust into the heart of this web of intrigue where Templars are rounded up en masse, their cries of protest drowned out by the clamor of soldiers and the metallic ring of weapons being drawn in the pre-dawn gloom. A mainstream historical fact grounds this turmoil on October 13, 1307. King Philip IV of France, in coordination with Pope Clement V, issued secret orders for the arrest of nearly all Templars in the kingdom, charging them with heresy, blasphemy, and other grave offenses based on fabricated confessions, which led to the immediate confiscation of their properties and marked a coordinated strike that shattered the order overnight. You can almost taste the fear in the air, the sharp tang of smoke from hastily lit fires where documents are burned, the rough texture of rough-hewn ropes binding your arms, and the low murmurs of confused brothers, questioning how their sacred mission led to this nightmare, all while the world outside buzzes with the news spreading like wildfire through taverns and courts. It's like being in a heist movie where the heroes suddenly become the villains, except here, there's no clever twist, just the cold reality of power plays gone too far. But even in this dark hour, let's inject a bit of that quirky flavor to keep the story from weighing too heavy on your eyelids as fringe tales swirl about the Templars' supposed cursed idols or mysterious relics that allegedly fueled these accusations, like whispers of a bearded head idol named Baphomet that they supposedly worshipped in secret rites, which sounds less like historical fact and more like the plot of a poorly scripted dungeon crawl where knights trade prayers for potions. Imagine you as a bewildered Templar thinking, wait, we're being arrested for what I thought we were just good at banking and bad at politics. And for a light joke to pierce the gloom, picture the arresting officers fumbling with their warrants in the dark one, muttering, does this say heretics or heuristics? Either way, you're coming with us. Hope you packed your sense of humor. This sudden assault wasn't just physical. It was psychological, with interrogators preying on the order's internal fractures from before, turning brother against brother in hopes of extracting damning testimony that could justify the plunder. Historians still argue whether the arrests were triggered by genuine evidence of wrongdoing or were purely a pretext for Philip's financial desperation, debating if the charges held any truth or were entirely manufactured to mask greed. As the net tightens, you find yourself carted off to grim dungeons, the journey a blur of jostling carts and jeering crowds, where the earthy scent of damp stone and the distant drip of water in echoing cells pull you into a sensory haze that's equal parts terrifying and tediously mundane. Tying back to that financial empire we explored earlier, the very vaults that once held kings' debts now become the targets with soldiers gleefully hauling away gold that was meant for crusades, turning symbols of power into spoils of war, as if the Templars' own success had set the trap. For another gentle jab, if this were a modern raid on a bank, it'd be like regulators storming in with coffee in hand saying, "Sorry folks, your accounts are frozen, time for a chat about those offshore holdings in Jerusalem." And amid the chaos, the quirky stories persist, with some claiming the Templars had enchanted amulets that could reveal hidden escapes, though in reality it was probably just clever architecture that let a few slip away like ghosts in the night, adding a layer of myth to the madness. Of course, the accusations don't stop at heresy. They spiral into tales of spitting on the cross, denying Christ, and even indecent acts during initiation rites, all designed to shock and alienate any potential sympathizers as you feel the weight of isolation in a cold cell, the faint scratch of straw under your fingers, and the oppressive silence broken only by distant shouts. A modern aside slips in here. It's akin to a viral social media scandal, where one bad tweet blows up into a full-blown cancellation, but instead of online outrage, it's inquisitors with thumbscrews highlighting how quickly reputations can crumble in the face of orchestrated attacks. For one more lighthearted poke, envision a Templar in custody, trying to lighten the mood with his cellmates. At least in here, we don't have to worry about taxes. Philip's handling that, for us now the generous soul. Yet beneath the sarcasm, the human toll is palpable, with families torn apart, and the Order's network dismantled piece by piece, all while the external enemies from previous sections revel in their victory. As the narrative flows through this whirlwind of arrests and accusations, you sense the Templars' defiance waning under the pressure, their once proud banners now trampled in the mud, with every whispered confession and forged document pulling you deeper into the abyss. The continuity from those gathering threats makes this feel like the inevitable crash after the build-up, a story where the hero's flaws and fortunes collide in spectacular fashion. Historians still argue whether the arrest marked the true beginning of the end, or if the Templars could have mounted a defense, pondering if internal divisions handed their enemies the keys, or if external forces were always destined to prevail. Finally, as the cell doors clang shut and the world outside fades to a muffled hum, you find yourself caught in the grip of this unfolding tragedy. The arrest's a stark pivot in the tale, ready to unravel further into the trials that await. From the clanging cell doors and the suffocating grip of arrest that left you in chains, the nightmare deepens as you're dragged into the cold, dimly lit chambers of interrogation, where the air grows thick with the metallic scent of heated irons and the damp chill of stone walls, pressing in, forcing confessions from parched lips, amid the echoes of screams and the relentless drip of water in the background, pulling you into a vortex of pain and pressure that tests the very soul of the Templars. Remember that web of accusations from the raids, with fabricated charges flying like arrows in the dark? Now those claims are put to the test in a series of brutal trials across Europe, where inquisitors circle like sharks demanding admissions that blur the line between truth and torment, making you feel the raw ache in your joints from unnatural positions and the bitter taste of fear coating your tongue, as if the Order's hard-fought legacy is being unraveled, thread by thread, under the harsh glare of flickering torches. As the trials grind on through the winter of 1307 and beyond, the interrogations become a grim spectacle, with Templars subjected to methods designed to break both body and spirit, their once proud vows twisted into weapons against them. A mainstream historical fact emerges from this ordeal. Many Templars confessed to charges of heresy, including denying Christ and spitting on the cross during initiation rites, but these admissions were often extracted under torture, as documented in the Papal Inquisition records, which revealed that techniques like the rack and strappado were employed to coerce statements that later formed the basis for the Order's condemnation. You sense the intensity building, the rough pull of ropes tightening around your limbs, the low hum of inquisitors' voices droning on with repetitive questions, and the faint acrid smoke from nearby braziers that promises more pain if you don't yield all, while the world outside feels distant like a dream, slipping away in the haze of exhaustion. It's as if you're starring in a bad historical reenactment, where the script calls for heroism but delivers only suffering, turning what should be a tale of faith into a cautionary yarn about how far people will go for power. Yet even in this abyss of agony, there's a sliver of the absurd that creeps in, offering a quirky tidbit to lighten the mental load as you drift toward sleep. Fringe stories persist that the Templars possessed enchanted relics or coded manuscripts from their Jerusalem days, which interrogators wildly misinterpreted as evidence of devil worship, like tales of a mysterious head idol that some claimed granted visions or protection, making the whole scene feel like a mix-up between a holy order and a magician's guild gone wrong. Perhaps the knights were just sharing ghost stories around the fire, not casting spells. Imagine you as a weary Templar thinking amid the pain, if they think this old amulet is cursed, wait till they see my bad knee from that crusade back in Section 5. And for a light joke to cut through the darkness, picture an inquisitor pausing to adjust his hood and saying, "Confess now or I'll have to use my special technique talking about taxes until you break." This forced revelation of secrets only fueled the spectacle, with some confessions painting the order as a den of iniquity, though many recanted once the torture stopped highlighting the unreliability of it all. Historians still argue whether the extracted confessions contained any kernel of truth, or were entirely the product of coercive methods, debating if the Templars' practices were genuinely unorthodox or simply misunderstood rituals amplified by fear. As the trials spread from France to other lands, you endure the relentless probing, where questions loop back on themselves like a never-ending maze, each admission leading to more demands, all while tying back to that financial empire that made the Templars such juicy targets after all. If you're holding king's debts, what's to stop them from calling it witchcraft to wipe the slate clean? The sensory details overwhelm you, the sticky sweat on your brow from the room's stifling heat, the metallic clink of chains shifting with every breath, and the muffled sobs of fellow knights in adjacent cells, creating a symphony of despair that's almost lullaby-like in its monotony. For another gentle jab, it's like a modern job interview gone horribly wrong, where instead of asking about your weaknesses, they're waterboarding you for details on your team-building exercises, turning sacred oaths into punchlines for the ages. And as the confessions pile up, some Templars spin tales that sound straight out of a fantasy novel, claiming involvement in rituals that never happened just to end the pain. It's as if they're ad-libbing a script to satisfy their captors, hoping for a quick exit. Of course, the human cost mounts, with trials dragging on for years in places like England and Spain, where local variations of torture and questioning reveal the order's fragmentation from internal conflicts, as brothers turn on each other in hopes of leniency, their unity shattered like glass under a boot. A modern aside weaves in here. This feels akin to a viral witch hunt on social media, where one accusation spirals into a frenzy of finger-pointing, but with stakes as high as life and death, reminding us that history's dramas aren't so different from today's outrages, just with fewer likes and more lashes. For one more light-hearted poke, envision a Templar whispering to his interrogator, "Look, if I admit to flying on broomsticks, can we wrap this up? I've got a nap scheduled for noon." Beneath the humor, though the trials expose the fragility of truth, with recantations and contradictions undermining the charges, yet the damage is done as public opinion sways against the order based on spectacle rather than substance. As the narrative winds through this gauntlet of grief, you feel the weight of these forced revelations settling like a heavy fog. The trials not just uncovering sins, but exposing the vulnerabilities that have plagued the Templars since their rise. The continuity from those arrests in Section 8 makes this feel like the next logical step in a downward spiral, where every confession echoes the plots and rivalries of before, pulling you deeper into the story's embrace. Historians still argue whether the trials were a fair pursuit of justice or a blatant miscarriage driven by political agendas, pondering if the confessions altered the course of history or merely served as a convenient narrative for those in power. Finally, as the echoes of tortured truths fade and the chambers grow silent, save for the occasional drip, you find yourself emerging from this ordeal, the trial's revelations, a bitter fruit ready to ripen into the order's dissolution that lies ahead. From the fading echoes of tortured confessions and the crumbling remnants of the Templars' trials, you now bear witness to the final unraveling, as the order's dissolution is decreed from on high, sealing their fate with the stroke of a papal pen in a grand hall filled with the weighty scent of incense and the rustle of official scrolls, dragging you into the somber aftermath, where centuries of glory dissolve into ashes, the air heavy with the crackle of burning documents and the distant toll of bells marking an era's end. Remember those harrowing interrogations and forced revelations from the last chapter, where accusations snowballed into a cascade of condemnations. Now those threads weave together in a swift and merciless conclusion as Pope Clement IV, swayed by the clamor of kings and the weight of supposed evidence, issues the papal bull Vox in Excelso in 1312, officially dissolving the Templars and scattering their remnants to the winds, making you feel the cold void of loss, as if the very foundations of their strongholds are giving way beneath your feet. As this decree echoes across Christendom, the Templars' world shatters, with their properties seized and redistributed to rival orders like the Hospitallers, transforming vast estates and treasuries into spoils for the victors, in a move that feels like a corporate takeover cloaked in holy rhetoric. A mainstream historical fact underscores this downfall. The papal bull not only disbanded the order, but also transferred its assets to other entities, with the Templars' wealth funneled into supporting ongoing crusades or bolstering the church's coffers, effectively erasing their institutional presence by March 1312. Though some members were allowed to join other orders or retire quietly, marking the end of an era that had spanned nearly 2 centuries. You can almost hear the solemn chants in Vatican halls, the sharp snap of seals on edicts, and the muffled protests of remaining knights as they're reassigned or imprisoned, all while the sensory tapestry of emptying commanderies, the echoing emptiness of once bustling halls, the earthy aroma of abandoned stables, and the faint whisper of wind through cracked stone walls creates a haunting backdrop that lulls you into a reflective trance. It's like watching a once mighty tree felled in a storm, its branches scattered and its roots exposed, leaving only memories in its wake. Yet even amid this grim finale, there's a touch of the whimsical that sneaks in as fringe legends take root in the fertile soil of loss, whispering of hidden treasures and curses that the Templars supposedly left behind, like tales of vast hoards buried under Temple Mount, or enchanted artifacts spirited away to secret locations, perhaps the legendary Ark of the Covenant, or alchemical grimoires that promised eternal life, turning the Order's end into a treasure hunter's myth that's as enduring as it is fanciful. Imagine you as a disillusioned knight slipping into the shadows with a cryptic map or a whispered code, thinking, if they're going to dissolve us, at least we'll leave them, guessing where the real gold went. And for a light joke to ease the heaviness, picture a former Templar grumbling to his new Hospitaller comrades, great now that we're merged, who gets the fancy cloaks? Hope you brought your own laundry service. These stories, while not grounded in fact, add a layer of intrigue to the dissolution, with some accounts claiming the Templars' knowledge lived on in shadowy societies, like the Freemasons, suggesting their legacy didn't vanish, but evolved into modern conspiracies. Historians still argue whether the dissolution was a necessary correction of abuses or a politically motivated erasure, debating if the Order's assets were justly redistributed or simply looted under the guise of piety. As the narrative shifts to the fates of individuals, you follow the paths of those who survived the trials, with figures like the last Grand Master Jacques de Molay facing the ultimate reckoning, his recantation of confessions, leading to a public execution in 1314 that became a symbol of defiance amid the Order's collapse. Tying back to the financial and military heights of earlier sections, de Molay's burning at the stake in Paris, where he reportedly cursed the king and pope from the flames, marked a poignant end to the Templar story, with his dying words echoing through history as a curse that some say hastened the deaths of Philip IV and Clement IV within months. The sensory details immerse you, the crackling heat of the fire, the acrid smoke stinging your eyes, and the roar of the crowd blending with the crack of flames, creating a visceral scene that's both tragic and theatrical, like the final act of a play where the hero's fall draws mixed cheers and tears. For another gentle jab, if this were a modern drama, de Molay might tweet his last words with a hashtag like Monsieur Templar down, turning historical martyrdom into meme-worthy moments, while the dissolution's ripple effects saw many knights fading into obscurity or integrating into other orders their skills in banking and warfare repurposed for new masters. Of course, the aftermath brings its own ironies as the Templars' wealth and secrets became the stuff of legend, inspiring endless speculation about what was lost or hidden, with some knights perhaps smuggling relics or knowledge to far-off lands like Scotland or Portugal where similar orders rose in their stead. A modern aside slips in. It's reminiscent of a tech startup getting acquired and disbanded, with the founders vanishing into the ether, their innovations scattered, but their ideas persisting in new forms, highlighting how the Templars' influence endured despite their official end. For one more lighthearted poke, envision a disbanded Templar trying to adapt to civilian life, saying, "So, what's next?" Opening a tavern called the Holy Grail. "At least then I can serve ale and tall tales to the curious." Beneath the humor, the dissolution marked not just an end, but a transformation, with the Templars' legacy woven into the fabric of history, from banking innovations to enduring myths. As the story draws to a close, you feel the finality settling like dust on ancient stones. The Templars' dissolution, a poignant reminder of how quickly power can fade, leaving behind echoes of their triumphs and tragedies. This culmination ties together the threads from origins to downfall, showing how internal strife, external threats, and human ambition conspired to bring about their end, with every section's events building to this inevitable conclusion. Historians still argue whether the Templars' dissolution was a tragic loss or a necessary evolution, pondering the lessons it holds for institutions that rise too high. From the ashes of the Templars' dissolution and the fading echoes of Jacques de Molay's final curse, you now emerge into the present day, where their shadow stretches across centuries, weaving through history books, conspiracy theories, and cultural lore, like a persistent ghost urging you to reflect on the Order's lasting impact that transforms their tragic end into a foundation for myths and modern institutions, all while the scent of old manuscripts and the hum of distant echoes pull you from the medieval haze into a world where knights in white cloaks still ride in our imaginations. Remember that poignant conclusion from the last chapter, with strongholds emptied and assets redistributed, marking the official close of the Templars' story. Now those remnants spark a legacy that endures, influencing everything from global finance to adventure tales, as you feel the weight of time shifting, the cool flip of a history page under your fingers, and the subtle thrill of uncovering how a dissolved order shaped the world long after the flames died out. As you delve into this enduring influence, the Templars' contributions reveal themselves in unexpected ways, from the foundations of international banking to symbols in popular culture, making their story far from forgotten. A mainstream historical fact highlights this. The Templars' innovative financial systems like letters of credit and a network of commanderies laid the groundwork for modern banking practices, influencing institutions such as the Knights Hospitallers, and even later entities like the Bank of England, while their military strategies contributed to evolving tactics in warfare that echoed through the Renaissance. You can almost hear the bustle of contemporary stock exchanges, the digital pings of transactions mirroring those ancient ledgers, the earthy aroma of coffee in modern boardrooms, where executives unknowingly echo Templar efficiency, and the low murmur of tourists exploring Crusader sites, all creating a bridge between past and present that feels both nostalgic and alive. It's like discovering that your favorite app was inspired by a 12th century innovation. Cool in theory, but who knew it started with knights hauling gold across deserts? To add a touch of whimsy, fringe lore abounds about the Templars' supposed hidden treasures and secret societies, turning their dissolution into fertile ground for endless speculation, such as claims that they passed down esoteric knowledge to groups like the Freemasons, who allegedly incorporated Templar symbols into their rituals, like the all-seeing eye or cryptic handshakes, making it seem as if the order never truly died, but morphed into a shadowy network of modern mystics. Imagine you as a curious explorer today, stumbling upon a dusty artifact in a museum, whispering, "Is this the key to their lost vault, or just a fancy paperweight?" And for a light joke to ease the transition, picture a Templar ghost haunting a banker. You think your crypto is secure? Try managing gold in the 1300s without Wi-Fi. These myths have infiltrated everything from Dan Brown's novels to video games, where players don virtual armor, to quest for the Holy Grail, blending history with fiction in a way that's as entertaining as it is misleading. Historians still argue whether these legends stem from genuine artifacts or are fabrications born from the Order's mysterious aura, debating if the Templars' influence was direct or simply romanticized over time. As the narrative explores further, you trace the Templars' cultural footprint in art literature and even conspiracy theories where their story fuels everything from Hollywood blockbusters to internet forums debating their role in events like the founding of America or the Rosicrucians. Tying back to earlier sections, their financial prowess and military exploits have inspired figures like Christopher Columbus, who some speculate drew from Templar maps, or modern secret societies that claim descent from the Order, blending the grit of their Holy Land patrols with today's quest for hidden knowledge. The sensory details envelop you, the glow of a smartphone screen displaying Templar documentaries, the crisp rustle of a graphic novel retelling their sieges, and the faint echo of a tour guide's voice in a castle ruin, lulling you into a contemplative state where past and present merge. For another gentle jab, if the Templars were alive today, they'd probably be starting a podcast called Knights Unplugged, sharing tips on banking apps and debunking their own myths, turning historical figures into relatable influencers with a medieval twist. Of course, this legacy isn't without its controversies, as the Templars' downfall serves as a cautionary tale in discussions of power corruption and institutional overreach, paralleling modern debates about big tech monopolies or governmental abuses. A modern aside weaves in here. It's like the Templars were the original too big to fail entity where their arrest and dissolution echo corporate scandals like Enron, but with more torches and less paperwork, reminding us that history repeats in cycles of rise and fall. For one more lighthearted poke, envision a Templar reenactor at a Renaissance fair quipping, "Back in my day, we didn't need VR to fight crusades, we just needed a horse and a prayer app." Yet beneath the humor, their story endures as a symbol of resilience, inspiring movements from charitable organizations to adventure seekers, all while their white cross remains a potent emblem in global culture. As the final chapter of this tale draws to a close, you feel the narrative settling like a gentle fog. The Templars' legacy, a testament to how one order's journey can ripple through time, influencing banking myths and human curiosity in ways that transcend their abrupt end. This synthesis ties together the origins, expansions, conflicts, and dissolution from previous sections, showing how their story isn't just a historical footnote, but a living legacy that continues to captivate and educate. Historians still argue whether the Templars' influence was overstated or profoundly transformative, pondering the enduring lessons of ambition, faith, and the perils of power.